Good afternoon. I am Skyler Ferran. I'm a principal over at Coalfire.
My name is Janessa Selvey. I'm in the payment security team at Target. I focus on P2PE, DSS, and SPOC.
All right, so I kind of want to talk about what P2PE is, and it's not just more PCI alphabet soup. You know, we've got ROC, SAQ, AEP, LMNOG. P2PE is point-to-point encryption, and it's kind of what it says. It's encrypting from one point to another. It actually has a very specific meaning in the context of PCI, though. So when we're looking at PCI, everything starts with scope. Scope is determined by our cardholder data, where we receive it, every system it passes through, every person it passes through, every process it passes through. All of those things need to be brought into compliance and secured to protect that data. Where P2PE comes in is it creates a way to manage that scope a little bit. It helps us reduce the applicable controls to minimize the number of weak links that we have along the way. So instead of having to worry about, oh, you know, that guy Bill, who's always terrible, accidentally messed something up with our systems and we lost a bunch of data, we're securing it from that initial point of interaction, that initial swipe, all the way until it hits the back end of our environment. So we're not just reducing our applicable controls, we're also increasing security by making these minimally valuable encrypted blobs of ciphertext. So some of the things we're going to talk about here is, you know, what does this mean for a merchant, which Jess will get into, and then also from an assessor perspective, how do I evaluate that?
Great. So I just want to take a minute and share with you what I hope you will get out of this presentation. Our goal here is to share with you that P2PE is not just a checkbox compliance step. It is a daily operational procedure that, when implemented correctly, can save your company time, money, effort, and increase your security posture. So I'll walk through kind of what that looks like. So in my house, there are 5 of us, and I get to do all of the laundry. So when I was thinking about a way to share the P2PE operational activities, this wash, rinse, validate, and repeat seemed like the perfect fit. Like laundry, if you miss a step, things can pile up quickly, and security is no different. You need to make sure it is consistent, intentional, and implemented correctly. So let's move on to the first step here, which is our wash cycle. So here is where you're establishing a clean and controlled foundation. This is more than just implementing and onboarding a P2PE solution. This is taking that initial detergent dose and running it through your environment to clean out any of those unknown risks or that uncontrolled scope. Here at this phase, you are implementing a validated P2PE solution in alignment with the PIM and what is the solution listing. At this step here, you're going to want to make sure that you're making sure that your environment is scoped correctly and that you're removing the sensitive data out from the rest of your environment. But from the start, also, maintenance needs to be part of your mindset. So you need to make sure you understand what's going on with, like, how are you doing firmware version updates? How are you doing device deployments? How are you tracking your devices? Things like that. At Target, we focus on this wash cycle in 3 areas. We have a centralized inventory of devices. We have a strong change management process that aligns very tightly with the PIM. And then we have assigned internal ownership of the P2PE program to make sure this is being followed and make sure everything is flowing appropriately. So a clean start is only meaningful if it's maintained. And so while I'm talking about this wash and this initial implementation, I'm kind of already getting into that rinse and validation phase too. So as you work into the rinse phase here, this is really that ongoing day-to-day operational activities that keep your implementation secure and compliant. For many organizations, this is where reality sets in. This is not a set it and forget it type of activity. This is something that you need to make sure that you're checking continuously. Things like device integrity checks, software version controls, and just knowing what's happening in your field and where these devices are being deployed. This is where we live. We live in this daily rinse cycle, things like validating logs, device replacements, device tracking. All that stuff is very important. This is kind of where we're constantly working in here. But it's not just technical. Compliance here also means making sure you have the latest version of the PIM and that you're following any changes that have happened. Also that you're checking your listing to make sure that you're running the latest versions. Where companies can run into issues here is if you have a set it and forget it mentality, because what can happen is that you can go through all of this initial phase of setting up your device, cleaning out your environment, and then you set it up and you forget about it until the next assessment comes around. And it is likely you're going to have some problems if you approach it in that way. So at Target, we have really focused on automation and documentation in this section here. We focus heavily on this rinse cycle by having a centralized inventory and making sure that our business rinse health cycles are baked into our compliance programs to make sure we're doing regular checks all the time. So I'll speak next to the validation process, but I just want to make sure here that it's clear that if you're not rinsing, it is likely things are not going to be clean and you're going to have a hard time meeting compliance. So now that we've rinsed through our daily operations, and now we've gone through the monitoring process, we're on to this validation cycle. Now this is that checkpoint. This is that stage to tell you how are you doing. Is what you've intended to implement actually being done correctly? And are you getting the security that you expected out of that? Some tools that you can use here are obviously things that I've talked about already. So the PIM, your solution listing, you can pull your PTS policy, and if applicable, you can make sure you have the latest version of your SAQ P2PE if that works for your environment. At Target, we focus on this validation steps proactively. We are continuously checking alignment against our PIM and our solution, and also working very closely with our assessor to talk about any changes that are happening in our environment and keeping him aware of what's going on, so we make sure that we're in alignment when that assessment phase comes. This validation phase here really is intended to give you this level of confidence. It's supposed to show your security leadership and your assessors that you know what's in scope and that things have been implemented correctly. And now, if you have done all of these steps and you've gone through this wash, rinse, and validation steps, the next logical phase is to repeat. So this phase is really about setting up that framework to make this a repeatable process. So at Target, we really focus on this repeatable process and bake this into all aspects of our compliance obligation programs. And this is what makes our P2PE process very durable. And what I mean by durable is that our assessments run smoother, our audit prep is lighter, and our security is stronger because of that. So as you think of your own program, just think about how implementation is more than just that one-time onboarding of a new P2PE system. It's really about that maintenance, monitoring, and validation, or that wash, rinse, validate, and repeat.
Perfect. So we've got a lot of resources available to us here, and it's important to know what those are, and Janessa touched on a few of them. The first is we'll talk about the P2PE instruction manual, or the PIM. Now, every P2PE solution provider is required to make this available, not just make it available anytime there's changes, they're sending it out to the merchants, and they need to make sure that it's up to date and accurate. This is going to be kind of the first point when you're looking at a merchant environment, whether you're an ISA, QSA, or just a merchant that's looking at their own environment, to make sure that we've implemented this solution properly. The next place that we need to check is also our P2PE solutions listings. Those are up on the PCI website, as are the PTS security policies. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in a moment. And then we've also got the SAQ P2PE, which gives us guidance and a framework of which controls are applicable. Now, if you're only doing card present using a P2PE solution, you're probably looking at only just SAQ P2PE. If it's part of a larger environment, you may just be using that to inform a little bit of what requirements are applicable there. So when you're validating this implementation, what are the steps? Well, step one, make sure you've got the PIM. I know I mentioned that before. It's really the most critical first step. You've got to make sure you know what you're looking for. The PIM is going to tell you what POI device types are in there, what firmware versions and hardware versions are following, all of those pieces. So we need to get the PIM so we know what we're even looking at for our devices. Next, we're going to check the P2PE listing to make sure that, yeah, the solution is still validated. It's not a PIM from 10 years ago that we happen to have, and it's since fallen by the wayside. There's a little exception for MMS solutions, merchant managed solutions, but generally, if a merchant has an MMS, they should know it. If they don't, then we've got a really big problem. But yeah, so MMS solutions generally are not going to be listed on the council website, but any other off-the-shelf solution that's being used should be up there. The other thing you'll notice is expiration dates, and there's an FAQ that addresses these. So P2PE solutions are validated in 3-year cycles, but there's a little bit of a process to renew those validations or to refresh them. So there's a little bit of a grace period there of about 6 months where you'll see these solutions go into the yellow and then the red. If you're looking at a merchant environment and they're using a solution that happens to be in the yellow or red, you don't need to set your hair on fire yet. You don't need to freak out. Usually this is just a little bit of a delay in the process in getting it renewed. And per that FAQ, we do have a little bit of time where we can still treat that as a valid solution until it's moved to the historical listings. Some of those delays can be that the merchant had some changes to their environment that they're trying to get in. Sometimes it's us as a P2PE QSA are a little slow getting everything wrapped up on the assessment. Sometimes it's AQM. No, not really. I would never blame AQM for ever being slow on anything at all. It's always the assessor. But then the next step is we're going to check the devices themselves. We're going to look at the firmware and hardware versions, applications that are running on there, and compare them against that P2PE listing and the PIM, making sure everything's all self-consistent and all lines up. When you're looking at the devices, sampling is your friend. How many thousands of devices you guys have?
Several thousand.
Yeah, I don't know about any of you. I would not relish the idea of going to check every one of those devices. So this is where you can follow sampling methodologies to look at a subset of devices and make sure that, yeah, they're generally, not generally, everyone in that sample are meeting the listing. And then somewhere along the way, you make money at the end there. So let's look at a few examples. If you've purchased anything with a credit card for the last 20 years, you've probably used a device like this, something in that similar form factor. You've got a screen, a keypad, swipe, dip, maybe NFC on there. So let's say that we're looking at a merchant environment that has one of these devices. How do we verify it against the listing? How do we make sure that it's running the proper OS, firmware, application numbers, et cetera? Well, this is where we go to the PTS listing on the website, and it actually is linked to that from within the P2PE listing itself. In there, we can pull up the security policy, and every one of these security policies should give you very clear instructions on how to validate those bits of data, the hardware number, the firmware number, et cetera. So I pulled some screenshots here. I don't know how well you can see them there, but you can at any time go and browse the PCI website. For this device, you can see on boot the current firmware versions. You can also go into a service menu and navigate through there. So there's a couple different methods of validating that. Now let's look at this one. This one's a little bit different. There is no keyboard on it. It's just a small little square with a screen. It has tap, swipe, dip, etc. How do we check this? Well, we looked at security policy, and it turns out there's a touchscreen service menu you can get into and see all those same information. In this case, it breaks down. Here's the parts of the version number so that you know what you're looking at, what stuff is relevant, what maybe isn't relevant to the P2PE solution. And then there's this device. How in the world are we supposed to validate this? There is no screen, there's no keyboard, there's no human interface device. You've got 4 little lights there, and my Morse code is pretty rusty, so even if that was an option, I don't think I'd be able to read that. So what do? We got to go to the security policy again. And when we dig into the security policy, we find out that, hey, there's a little file that gets dropped on boot that gives you all the information you need, hardware, firmware, software versions. You also have a sticker on the back when they're initially deployed. You just have the merchant pull that file out, and you're able to take a look and validate everything you need. So even with these different form factors, there's always going to be instructions available ready for you to go in and check so that you can validate, yeah, this device is part of a valid listing. It's part of their PIM and describes what they're following there, and everything lines up with each other. It's all self-consistent.
Great, thanks, Skyler. So our message here is to share with you how you could implement a strong P2PE operational process into your environment, taking into account some of those different areas that you know that the QSA could check. And so I kind of just want to wrap up here. I think we've covered kind of that area of this wash, rinse, validate, repeat. So I'm going to do some takeaway here on a couple other areas I wanted to call out from a merchant's perspective I think could be important. Number one, if you haven't implemented P2PE yet, P2PE is a huge game changer as it relates to DSS scope. So big reduction in scope, so look into that. If applicable and you can use an SAQ P2PE, that is a great way to go. It will reduce your audit complexity and cost. But lastly, I think and most important, success here in operating and implementing and operating a P2PE solution really has to do with that continuous checking, validation, and making it a repeatable process. So as I close out today, I just want to share with you that I think the merchants who get this correct and focus on this operational side of P2PE can really see benefits in their program. And I know this because this is how we have been very successful at Target in our P2PE program.
Perfect. So thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, please feel free to grab either of us. I know we all like to pontificate about the finer points of PCI, as I like to say. I'll be around booth 67 over for Coalfire, but feel free to bug us. We'd love to talk to you and answer any questions you may have. So thank you.